Okay, this is problem number 2. I kind of have the same background available for you here. You're dealing with the inverse. If it says sine inverse, your answer is going to be an angle. If it says sine, then your answer is going to be that relationship. Of course, inverse anything is looking for the angle. Okay, now, looking right here, you have inverse sine of the sine of pi over 4. Well, what's going to happen? It first appears that the sine and the inverse sine should cancel. And to some extent they do. 4 pi over 5. Does that fall between negative pi over 2 and positive pi over 2? Well, let's kind of get that to a common denominator. Well, we can change 4 pi over 5 and the pi over 2's. We can change those both to a denominator of 10. So 4 pi over 5 is the same thing as 8 pi over 10. And the interval then would be negative 5 pi over 10 and positive 5 pi over 10. 8 pi does not fall there. 4/5 pi or 8 pi is going to be located in the second quadrant. And if it's in the second quadrant and we're talking about sine, what is another angle that would basically have the same value? Or what could it be? It's not in that interval. So it's in the second quadrant. And we determined that in the second quadrant, sine is positive. What other quadrant is sine positive in? That would be the first quadrant. So the sine of 4 pi over 5 is equal to the sine of pi over 5. They have the same sine value. They don't necessarily have the same all trig values, but those two angles have the same sine value. So our final answer is pi over 5. It is the angle that would give us this answer. Because remember, you started out with an inverse, so that means your answer should be an angle. And if 4 pi over 5 had been in the correct interval, we could have used it, but it wasn't. It was a second quadrant. We needed a first quadrant. The first quadrant one would be pi over 5 for the equivalent angle.